Hey everybody, this is Dark Guards, and we're back with another video, and it's been 3 days. I know I was promising almost a daily video, but things happen and you can't always produce a daily video. The big thing in progress has kind of happened, as I started working on a lot more mechanics for the radiation. I know I said that we would probably wait till end of time to kind of do this, but it kind of turns out as I was working my way through the project, radiation system needed to be worked on first rather than after the reactors being done and everything else. So what progress actually has been made is we now have a radiation map system. It's not tested yet. I still have a bit to do. I still have to work on saving load code. I still have to do some testing for it. Like, there's going to be a ton of JUnit just to make sure this system actually works appropriately, because I don't want any problems. For those who are kind of familiar with what I'm kind of doing with the radiation map system, you've probably seen me do a few other things in older videos where I was working on data map structures to kind of store information exterior to the actual game in order to be able to do things that you can't normally do with Minecraft, like being able to do the thermal system. That's something I was working on for a while. ICBM 2.417 actually does use that thermal system. We were working on the extended map system for a while, which would allow us to do things like cracked blocks, be able to show heated blocks, be able to show different things. That system was another example. Now we've got the radiation system, which is something I did plan to work on for Volts Engine, but because now Atomic Science is not a Volts Engine mod, I am working on the system as part of Atomic Science. It will be potentially ported over to Volts Engine, or it may just be accessed from Volts Engine if Atomic Science is installed. I haven't figured that out perfectly yet. But the system does exist. So we have a radiation system that will allow you to get basically a map per world. It does take care of some events, like we get a world unload event, some chunk load save events. So it does actually store some information in the chunks. The cool thing about this is it does not use a separate save system like the other map systems did. I may actually port the other map systems over to this. I just gotta do a little bit more research and everything else. But we have the map. The map does store chunks, so it works almost exactly the same as Minecraft does. A little bit different, not precisely identical, but it does work. So we got an index value, a chunk. With the chunks actually do store the information directly. This does use a layer system. The layer system does modulate the array, so it does not initialize with a full set of array. It will initialize with a certain length that we think it will use. So when radiation is first introduced in the world, it'll go, okay, I'm going to give you +5 and -5 of that radiation source, because that's where I kind of expect the amount of radiation to spread. And what I'm talking about by radiation also is we're not talking about the radiation value. So like if you've ever played Fallout or something, you'll know that you get exposed to rads and your character absorbs rads. Well, how it works in real life is you actually absorb what's called RIMS. Rads is the measurement of exposure that you can absorb. And then what is actually stored in a world, what is actually in the world that actually affects you, is radioactive material. Radioactive material, of course, decays off into radioactive particles, and the particles is what you're actually getting hit by. You're not actually getting hit by the radioactive material, you're getting hit by the particles. So that's how this map system is going to work. It stores the radiation in the layers and everything else. So what it'll do is it'll store that radiation value. When it first initializes the chunk, it'll do +5 and -5 layers. So you'll get so many layers. Each layer is going to store a 16 by 16. This is about the easiest way we can do the data structure. And then it can store up to 256 layers. It will be unlikely that you will actually use all 256 layers in a chunk, because the simple reason is the most top half of the world is usually air blocks. So you'll, most of the time, if you completely max out a chunk for radiation, 128 will probably be the likely point you'll hit, because that's about where World Gen stops. And I've actually done some of the math for this, which is in the layer file. So layer file stores an int array, it tracks how many blocks used, keeps an index, really simple data structure. It's got 16 by 16, so it's got 256 positions. This uses a certain amount of memory. The memory's down here, so you get 32 bytes per integer, 256 indexes. It uses about 8,000 bits, or about 1 kilobyte per layer. This is a really, really small amount of information, basically not much. If you get a situation where the full chunk, it does exist, it will use 262 kilobytes memory-wise. And there is a distinction between memory and hard drive, because memory and hard drives save information differently. So memory is you're going to guaranteely store everything inside bytes, not bits. Hard drive will store things in bits in order to compress the most information. But if you get the 32 by 32, which is about your max render distance, you can end up with 268 additional megabytes of memory if the chunk is completely full from top to bottom with radiation data. So that's, you think it's a lot of memory, but you have to realize that that's a 32 by 32 area. And it can be a problem if you had a lot of players doing that, but the reality of it is we only expect there to be 10 layers per chunk. And if you do that same amount of information, 10 megabytes per player, and you could have like hundreds of thousands of players. So if you had 100 players, you might get to see a gigabyte. But once again, we're back down to the reality is that it's very unlikely that every chunk will have radiation actually stored in it. More than likely what will happen, I was talking to one of my other developers about this, is that a reactor, when it goes to go explode, like say you build your reactor and you build it incorrectly, it overheats and then some reason it explodes and spews radioactive material everywhere, which is going to be rare because most reactors, when they go to get too hot, they'll melt down and just collapse and you'll just have a hole in the ground, and you'll have a little bit of radioactive material. So even if it exploded, you may get a 5x5 chunk area, 25 chunks. You may end up with about 250 kilobytes worth of memory being used to store the radiation data for that area that exploded reactor-wise. And now it's unlikely you're going to have a ton of players on a server, if you ever run a server with this, that have a ton of blown up reactors. Even if you're thinking in terms of ICBM, because this plan is to use a system for ICBM, even if you had a ton of people setting off nukes all the time, the radiation wouldn't build up to a point where you would actually be wasting a ton of memory, simply because it's unlikely you have a lot of these events happen in a series. Even if you did, the radiation is only going to be stored on exposed chunks. It's only going to be stored on certain levels and stuff. So you may have chunks that are completely empty because they didn't actually get into radioactive material. On top of this, the radiation is planned to be decayed over time, so every time it rains in game, the radiation is going to be washed away little bit by little bit, and it'll be pretty much washed away off the map is how I'm going to treat it. So that way we don't have that much of complexity. So the radiation will go away and you won't have that problem anymore. And yeah, and then in most cases, what you're going to have, as I said, you're going to have a hole in the ground, which will just have a little bit of radiation, which is going to be one chunk in size. So you're going to end up using maybe 1 kilobyte per reactor damage that happens. You may have some containment spills that maybe use a couple chunks worth of radiation and everything else. So that's a cool thing. So we got over that. That's the boring information. I left the cool stuff to last. We're going to get an actual game because I just wanted to talk about the radiation map before I get implemented. I'll do another video actually showing this system in working condition, as I have made a couple blocks that are radioactive to actually prototype this. They're not fully textured yet. I'm still waiting on some actual textures for them. We can actually take a look at these in game real quick. So let me go ahead and set my game mode here. I made a world that I actually can't do stuff in. Let's go back to one of the other worlds. So we do actually have a couple radioactive blocks. So we have this, which is our grass, and we do have a dirt block. The dirt block is not colored at the moment, but the grass block actually is. Now the plan is to, of course, make the green glow change based on the radiation level. Now this is not how it works in real life, but this is being implemented purely for the gameplay aesthetic for the game. I will make it where these blocks can be disabled in the config for those who just don't want to deal with them, because they are just there for visuals. So what will happen is when a radioactive material ends up being spread out, it'll spread over the area, and what you'll have is the grass will slowly turn like a dark green where it's kind of dead almost. It will still grow and spread. It actually will grow faster because the way I'm going to treat this is that the more radiation you have in an area, to a certain point, like once you get to a certain point, it's just going to kill all living material because it'll be too hot for the grass to survive. But if you're under the limit by which the grass can survive, it's actually going to use the energy from that, the heat of being heated up and everything, to grow faster. Because after all, like if you put a sun lamp next to a piece of grass or something, the heat from that is going to actually make the grass have to work a little less in order to survive. The same thing goes for plants and animals. Now, of course, the radiation is going to hurt these creatures. So if you had an animal getting exposed to radiation, it's going to develop cancer and die. The same thing happens to grass. It's going to develop something equivalent to cancer, and it will die as well. But eventually you'll get plants that will survive it. And eventually you'll get animals that are accustomed to radiation. This is kind of the whole lore behind Fallout, that you get animals that are mutated and everything else. We're going to apply that same kind of logic here. We're going to have the grass grow. One, it's just a cool gameplay mechanic that you'll have this radioactive grass that'll grow, that'll be spreading radiation itself around. So you'll have to kind of deal with that if you expose an area to radiation, it could get out of control really quickly. Of course, we'll have plants wither and die. We'll have trees wither and die. We'll have flowers are probably just flat out die, because flowers are kind of delicate. They don't really like to grow in a lot of conditions. So we'll do that. So we got those two things. Now, for those who have noticed in the top left-hand corner, who actually have been paying attention, we have a rim and a rad system. Now, this is going to play into, this is kind of the reason why I wanted to work on the radiation map kind of early, but I wanted to get a video out today, so I couldn't get a chance to show this. But the rad value is going to track how much radiation you're being exposed to at all times. And this is only going to show, by the way, if you actually have equipment at the time. So this is not going to be up there at all times. I will add configs to adjust the position of it. But the rim is how much radiation your character is actually absorbed, and it's what's going to be used to track how much, pretty much how badly you're going to get messed up by being exposed. So that'll be tracked. And the plan is, of course, how this is going to work is that you're going to have this work with the helmet on. So if you have took the helmet off, of course you wouldn't actually do it. This does update it, so if I do take the helmet off, I will slowly start to take radiation damage from the radioactive items I have in my inventory. I put the helmet back on, it stops tracking. This is controlled server side. It is stored on the player, so when your player does die, the radiation will reset. It can also be cleared easily. There actually is commands for this, so there is actually, you can do atomic.science, if I can spell today. You can do rad to get your own rad value. Of course, you can type in a player's name, so you could do, if you're an admin and you want to see what somebody's radiation level is, or if you were making command blocks, you can see what somebody's radiation level is. You can also set the radiation level, so I can set my radiation level back to 0. Of course, I can also set it to different values. And the command does also work on players as well, so I can do player.949 and set the radiation level. There will also be commands, by the way, for this to work on setting radiation levels of areas of the map. So if you want to make a command block to spread radiation across the map randomly, or you wanted to clear radiation because you're an admin and something happened and you want to get rid of all the radiation, I will be making commands for that. I will be trying to make them as simple as possible and everything else. But that's all I got for you guys today. I'll be coming back with more videos showing off different things, and of course we will continue trying to stream various things as we go. For those who don't know what the stream URL, it's pretty much it's Twitch TV/DarkGuardsman. It's the same username I run by, and you should be able to watch me. I've been streaming lately MechWarrior. We will be doing BattleTech, and hopefully eventually I'll get into streaming development, but I'm still getting into that, because usually when I'm coding either early in the morning, late at night, when I can't actually stream. But I'll see you all later.